She said she never gets a chance to do an action-based film.
She heard the log line of a film, right? And her sons weighed in, correct? Who are superhero fans. And I don't know, maybe that sold it for her.
When you're taking that story and you're trying to make a series out of it, trying to tell that story, does that become a little taxing on you?
Nuances come only through the how you keep your eyes open and what you hear and language you speak in.
Hello and welcome to the Humans of Cinema podcast. My name is Ahona and I have with me a panel of creators who have created portraits of humanity, heartfelt, realistic portraits on screen. It takes a lot of creativity, observation and empathy to look at ordinary lives and see the extraordinary in it. And I think all of them here have done that. Thank you so much for being here and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, when I say that you've really seen the extraordinary in ordinary lives, I mean it because a lot of your films have made me feel very represented, feel seen, feel comforted. And so I'd like to know what are the films and stories that you have seen that have made you feel like that, made you feel comforted in your skin?
It's a very difficult question.
And it's probably a long list, over the
yeah.
years.
But what kind of films in general? Is there a particular type of films that you like to watch? Or is it...
I love a lot of independent films, especially the American independent films. So something like Short Term 12, something like Room. Then of course, in terms of more international, I love something which is very larger than life. Life is Beautiful. It made a huge impact on me in seeing the magic in otherwise dying world and realities. So yeah, just a lot of even within Pan India there is just beautiful work. So yeah, I think watching is so constant from The Worst Person in the World recently, so it's just a constant this thing, like every year you're just like, these are the this is something that is expanding my vocabulary and my exposure to the world and the world of storytelling. Like I love Boyhood and it blows my mind on how many years they shot to put the narrative together. Yeah.
I'd agree, with her on that. It's what you said, right? Representation, authentic representation. And there's a wide array of it. And there's also escapism. For example, I love something like The Crown. It's not a world I would live in or expect to live in, but we've heard so much about this family and the world around it. Many of us have grown up. Same thing with Spencer, which is a new film that's come out by Pablo Larraín. Also, something as diverse as Dickinson, which is a show on Apple TV+, but it's about such a well-known female voice that no one knew about until she actually passed away. And it's been done in such a contemporary manner. So I would say anything that's a mix of representation and authenticity is what really resonates with me. And it could be from anywhere in the world.
So for me, right now, like currently, I really liked Valeria, a Spanish show on Netflix. I think it's too much fun. It's kind of the Sex and the City kind of thing. So at that point of time, it was a revelation to watch something like Sex in the City or Devil Wears Prada, where you have the most awesome boss who's so strict, and so those are things sometimes you like to see that world, or even for that matter, Ugly Betty, which has now come into a Spanish kind of. They've, I think, made a remake of Ugly Betty in Spanish, or even The Post. So basically, any Meryl Streep movies, or even there's so many. Which is that one? Sorry, I'm forgetting the name. But the woman who fights for. Against a company.
Erin Brockovich.
Erin Brockovich, yes. Now it's just there. In fact, recently I saw it. So, these are the kind of movies which will always keep. There's one movie called Anjali in Tamil by Revati. It's one of my most favorite films. at that point of time, they made it, and it was such a enduring film to watch. Or Pursuit of Happiness, of course, it's not a woman-centric film or a woman lead, but I do feel that there is a lot of underdog kind of play in that, which also resonates now. Yeah, there are so many in that zone. Even something like Mirch Masala, or go back to our own films like Lamhe or Ijazat, or there's so many of them which are so beautiful. Yeah.
I've made this huge list of recommendations in my head as you were speaking. Just I'm going to watch these and put these on my watch list now. So, but now that you speak about, having these characters be in worlds that we can't relate to, and, they are in their own little stories, maybe they're comforted by it, maybe they're not. And this has always made me very curious, because actors, when they are playing a particular character, they just have to think about that one character. But you're wider creators. You have to populate a world with characters. So how do you draw so many realities then into making this one film?
See, at the end of the day, filmmaking is collaborative, right? So yes, while as producers and creators, directors, there is a lot that we bring to the mix. We work with some tremendous people, right? And the same thing goes for those across the table from us, whether it's a streaming partner like Netflix, or it's a studio, or anyone at all. It's also, I can speak for myself, but just being open to different experiences, right? Just, I remember Sophia saying in the earlier session that we had, she heard the log line of her film, right? And her sons weighed in, correct? Who are superhero fans. And I don't know, maybe that sold it for her. And that's what we do. We listen to different voices, opinions. We watch such a mix of things. We read a mix of things. We hear a mix of things. And I believe it's my responsibility as a producer to be able to provide a platform wherever possible, or an opportunity, or just have that trust, that gut feeling sometimes that maybe this isn't something I've done before, or maybe I don't connect with it, but at the end of the day, these are human stories. A superhero film is mounted differently, but at the very core of it are human emotions and values that across the board, someone or the other would have connected to.
So I'd like to link the first question to the second one. So if you ask me what I like, is what I would like to make, right? So somewhere what stays with me is it reflects in the work I want to do. So in terms of the current lineup that we have, a lot of them are real stories, are stories that need to be told. For example, one of them is like Scarlett Keeling. I'm not sure if you know Scarlett Keeling, who was murdered and raped in Goa. We have her life rights. So it just depends on what is, what stays with you, what stories stay with you, what stories you want to tell, what is the depth of that story, and will the audience be able to resonate with those kind of stories? So I think that's important.
But does that become also a little taxing on your mental state sometimes when you're taking a story that is brutal, like the one that you just spoke about? When you're taking that story and you're trying to make a series out of it, trying to tell that story, does that become a little taxing on you?
Someone has to tell the story, yeah. So that's important. I think that's more important than taxing. Yeah, there are like the story which we are doing for Netflix now is Jigna Vora's story. She was a crime journalist. She was accused of bumping off a colleague crime journalist. She was put behind bars. She wrote the book, and we thought that story needs to be told. It took her 7 years to come out clean, and it required a platform, and that story needed to be told. So taxing or not, if the story has to be told, it has to be.
Right. So, with platforms such as Netflix, now OTT is becoming the way to tell stories that you couldn't tell otherwise, right? There's now this proper audience for the OTT who knows that this is the story that I will sit and watch. No matter, as you said, if it's a story that needs to be told, I will sit down and listen to it. Do you feel like OTT is really expanding that space, or do you feel like cinema in itself could have done that?
Absolutely. I mean, OTT is definitely gotten into more houses. There is a habit change that has happened. There is a generation that has started watching pan-India work. It's united us from, everybody's talking about the amazing Malayalam cinema and consuming it and seeing and celebrating it. So it's united us as a country. We have so many cinema languages here. There are a whole parents' generation watching French, Korean, Turkish shows in Hindi dub and calling each other and sharing notes. So definitely the audience base has expanded. And then we have a global platform, like we are all watching Korean content, and we are all talking about it and loving it. So it's a matter of time where Indian content is also going to break out around the world. It is already, the platform is ready, the filmmakers are all ready, but it's definitely expanded the audience base.
Just to add to that, there's a new format that's come in, which is episodic narratives, right? Scripted, unscripted, both of them. Now, there are certain stories that cannot be told in 2 to 3 hours. They do require more. And not just an increase in audience base, we've had an increase in talent base. Not a lot of people, I'd say producers as well, have been restricted by what they think economically could work at the box office. But now people are coming out a bit more fearless and they're like, I do have this story. Maybe I don't need to be restricted to the hours or the way that I show it. And I tell it I can be a bit experimental or different in terms of treatment, tone. So a lot of really amazing talent is coming out. And streaming platforms like Netflix, they give us the opportunity to, kind of bring in new people. Ashwiny had said this in a previous session. Actors, you can see them in a different light that you wouldn't in a standard box office film. Writers, some terrific writers, directors, and it's really opened it up, which cinema could not have done.
I think everything is covered. I do feel that there is a lot of talent in our country in terms of writers, directors, producers. We are a country of stories in every nook and corner, and everyone has some kind of story which they want to say. It's only that we have opened our spectrum of stories, not only from our surrounding, but from every corner. So I would say, like, going into the depth of our society and our country. So what happens is that then you are finding stories right from north to south and east to west, and platforms like Netflix brings together a whole lot of gamut of stories in the language with you're most comfortable with. So there was a time when we had to say stories only in Hindi because we felt that, that's the language, that's where the stories are and that's where people watch. But having said that, I feel that now there is an opportunity for storytellers to tell a story in the most comfortable language they can tell, because at the end of the day it's a story, and every story has a heart, has an emotional connect, whether in various forms, and that is what needs to be touched. And with OTT platforms, with platforms like Netflix, what happens is that you can hear in the language which you are most comfortable in, and you can read in English or any other subtitle which you're more comfortable. So that's what we want as storytellers, to reach every person staying in any part of this world. Otherwise, we would not be watching Korean drama or Turkish drama or even Georgian films, which I don't understand anything, but somewhere I just feel that, their culture and my culture is so same. It's so similar in terms of how we deal with things. I would have never known that there is a complete community in US which is more strict than even many other sects. So I would have never known that if I had not watched that. And then you go study more. So as creative people, we are curious. We want to know more. We want to know what happened, why did it happen. And therefore, what she's saying is that, getting the rights and the story needs to be told. It's because once we tell the story is what it will start, like Guneet was saying, start conversations. And it does reflect somewhere a part of, we have the ability as storytellers to tell stories that can inspire, aspire, or even give a food of thought, or start conversations on what can change or what can be accepted. And I think that's the great place to be in.
Right, right, of course. You know, speaking of relating to a story even through subtitles, I watched Minnal Murali and I was blown by it. I am a huge comics fan. I read all the superhero comics all through my childhood. And when I was seeing that film, I thought this is so culturally rooted. This is such an Indian version of what a superhero would be. And I'd really like to know, how did you manage to create this other language of a superhero film?
Yeah, see, when we started we started to think about creating a superhero, we had that in mind. It should be a local superhero, like grounded, because if we bring like a superhero from Hollywood, I know people will never love it. So we wanted a village boy being a superhero, wearing a lungi like that, and that is how we wanted. So, and that experiment, it got. Yeah, everyone loved it. So that is what we had, the basic thing. We should go only for a local superhero.
That was there from the get-go, or was it like constructed as you were making the...
No, we in the beginning itself, we had that plan. It should be a local superhero. Yeah,
Right.
from a village. That is what we had in mind. Otherwise, we know like our audience would never love it to see coming like what we see in Hollywood, you know. Yeah, so that is how we created it. Yeah.
Right, right. You know, again, with Minnal Murali, this portrait of masculinity that it has in it. And I feel like all of you have done that. You have really challenged the masculinities that we have seen in Indian cinema before. And that's also very important to register, because whenever we talk about female storytellers, we talk about how they're telling the stories of women. But female storytellers also tell wonderful stories about men. And somehow all of you have done that. Has that been something that you've done very consciously? Has that happened, you know, just naturally?
I feel, first of all, I think the more and more stories we say, we should stop dividing women-centric films and men. I don't think so we ever say male-centric film, but we say hero films. So I think we should just like discard this whole woman-centric films completely, is because the story is of one protagonist, and the protagonist may happen to be a woman or a man. Now what has changed is, the narrative has changed, is that you have a hero who's a woman, and hero males were always, they have never had existential crisis, so that's there. So when we say this, it is a lens in which we see the films and the story and the narrative. So I do feel that, yes, what we experience as women, what we understand and what we read is, we may get our little, nuances when we are telling stories where it is led by a woman, but that doesn't stop us from telling stories about men who have also gone through various ups and downs, and their story, whether it's a superhero film or whether it's a rags to riches story. It's a lens in which we see, and nuances come only through the how you keep your eyes open and what you hear and language you speak in. So it's a mixture of too many elements which get in. So I do feel there are a lot of male directors who are male directors who also make amazing films which have a woman in the lead. Thappad was a great example. So I would say that it's how we change the narrative, and how I would love to see scripts coming to me where the first sentence in that email doesn't say, this is a very amazing woman-centric film and I'm great that only a woman can do it. Yes, sometimes there are some films and some stories which if handled by a woman, and we need more women directors, we need more of a force to keep coming and evolving. Yeah, I understand that aspect, but it can be looked at either ways also. I would love to see that, this is a full male-led film, and we would love to see how you look into it.
I think we need to, like she said, we need to reach a stage in which the behind the scenes, you're not saying, "Acha, ye woman director hai kya ye male director hai?" You know, you should be reaching a representation of equal. When I spoke to a South Indian woman director, she said she never gets a chance to do an action-based film
Yeah.
or a film with humor because they just feel, the producers feel she's not cut out for it. The Netflix survey in the US, which they did in 2018, 2019, very clearly has no woman director directing horror or sci-fi. So, I mean, we need to not segregate and say these are women narratives and these are male narratives. You know, it doesn't work like that. A story is a story, and I don't think a woman can be judged about she can conduct herself or handle a certain film in a certain manner.
You know, for the longest time, I always compared this with writing a novel, writing a book, is because a whole lot of novels, especially the mystery ones, are written by women. And we have never across the world seen who the author is. We have just known the author by the name. And because we follow some authors so religiously, we go and look into their books. Till the time you just go and research and you say, hey, oh, okay. So how many Mills and Bones book stories have been written by men? Many. And also so on and so forth. There are many books written. So, Notebook. So it's just, I keep comparing that with writing books and making movies. Maybe because this is a more visual medium and you see and you are kind of seeing what is happening, and reading is more of a one-to-one thing. So that's where the difference is. But it's actually the same, is because the narrative and what stories you're saying is from one lens which you're looking at.
But also, now that you talk about, you know, cinema being a very visual medium, I think this is something that I've observed about all your work, Lunchbox, Masaan, all of these films, Bareilly Ki Barfi, Minnal Murali. When I see these films, the focus is on the larger appearance of the film. Whereas for the longest time, people were really obsessed with the appearance of the actors. Now it's about the look of the film in general. It's a project in itself. It's a story. How is that shift happening, do you think, from the appearance of individual people to the appearance of the film itself?
I mean, there is no right and wrong. You know, it's all a personal choice. But there is always, like, you know, Shivani was just saying that there is escapist cinema, and then there is a representation of reality. So we are all products of our exposure, you know. So you can totally have people flying and or have a world where you know, you escape into you cut and you go to the, you know, Swiss mountains for a dance and then you come back. So you can totally make fantastical music dramas, but you can also totally go deep dive into Banaras, into Ghats, in alleys of Bandra, you know, for that culture, that representation, that voice, that language, that dialect, or Lucknow. So it is a very subjective choice on what we want to do. So I have largely done more real, more reality, more things that we see, you know, more middle class, more existential, more atmospheric. So that is something that I have inhabited, and I'd love to portray that on screen, and I get more fascinated to that storytelling. But each their own, you know, and we all coexist, and that's what makes us an industry in many languages.
And each project is different. And at the end of the day, it's a mix of the vision of the director, the producer, everyone else involved. So I think both coexist in terms of certain films which focus just on the protagonist, and then there are films that you perhaps would think are more balanced in terms of production value, music, sound, a mix of them. And like Guneet said, each to their own, and each project just pops out accordingly.
I'll also, I think, thank the internet age, is because what happens is that I also just like kind of dissected like every department, whether all your technicians, like now today I know who's a cinematographer of this particular film, or who wrote this film, or who's a music director, who even edited this film. And the audience and cinema lovers are going and like, you know, reading about him. They are going and seeing, okay, you know, this is the person who did this thing and it's very nice. And then you go on to Instagram, you kind of start following that person. The reels are made like it's a big advantage for creative people, is because then you see some songs being played and then you go back to that music director who he or she played that song. And so the ecosystem of creation and co-creation, and then, you know, everything just blooming is kind of what I would say. It's like a whole tree with lots of different fruits.
Thank you for saying that about reels. A lot of people would actually really criticize them as a creative medium, but thank you for putting that spin on it, because it really does do that. It leads you to these crevices you wouldn't.
So there are a lot of songs which I've actually heard because of the reels, and not otherwise. And such amazing songs, like that Guneet had thing had put something which I've started hearing this on loop now. You had put something on that 5 songs, no, something you had put there. So yeah, so you have to give credit in the sense that I do feel that it's such a amazing medium to have, is because you're thinking of something. And I also feel that in the internet age, although it has its downsides and, you know, a lot of things, every new thing which you adapt has a good side and a bad side. But when you go to any small town or any time on a weekend somewhere, you're just crossing the road, you would see a couple of youngsters who are making some reels, doing this like little acrobats and, you know, doing those box beats and all those kind of thing. It gives you so much of confidence. You are on the phone, you just need a good phone and you need a good video there. And they are being able to make YouTubers. There are a lot of YouTubers who come from different parts of the country. But at the same time, what happens is that they would be loitering around in the evening, not doing anything, with worried parents thinking when their kids are going to come home. But right now, they're utilizing their time by doing these things, which is... I always look at the other side and say, okay, maybe, you know, the mind is diverted and they're doing something which is worthwhile.
Yeah. And I think for us as well, you know, it's such a different perspective on the work we do, because you see what the fans in the audience, what part of what film or story or series they pick up, and sometimes memes, sometimes these reels become huge. And they do so much more for the project as well. And it's great for us to listen and to also know what's really clicked. And there's an audience for everything. There honestly is.
True. So on that note, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much.
It was wonderful talking to everybody. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.